No, you're good. You're in your environment now. This is most important.
I'm in my environment. Let me get this got it thing out here. Hold it. Got it. Let's see. Okay.
All
That's
right.
good. All right.
So
all right,
gonna,
ready to go, baby. Forget about all this. We're relaxed. It's a beautiful day. Where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles. I'm over near CBS
my God,
Fairfax.
you're probably down the street.
I could be.
We could have. I'm right in the fucking heart of Beverly Hills. God damn it. Okay.
Here's the thing.
Right.
Let's start here, Randy. Tell us who you are and where you're coming from, what area, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead.
You mean where I'm coming from physically?
In general.
Well, I mean emotionally.
Exactly.
Well, I can't. I mean, my name is Randy Edelman. I'm a composer of many, many different things, and I'm coming from my studio in the heart of Beverly Hills. Not too exciting.
So here's the thing. It is exciting because you're one of my favorite composers, and I have interviewed you before at a couple of junkets here and there. And the thing about this, when I think of Last of Mohicans, there's a couple other things. I think your classical background, and I love classical music because I marched in the drum and bugle corps, and I learned it from Phantom Regiment. So I think about that, and you're the only one that I know of. And I love Jerry Goldsmith and Hans Zimmer and Rachel Portman and all of them. But they don't have your classical background of the things that you have done. That's what separates you from everybody else.
Well, okay, I'm very happy you said that because most people, since I did lots of song albums and stuff early on, they think I come out of that. That's where and you couldn't be further than the truth. My background is totally in classical music. That's all I did when I was a kid. And I went to a very kind of serious music conservatory, of which a little slip one day has changed in a way my whole life. But that's what I did. And I had that background and I loved it. I always liked other things. I always listened to pop music on the radio and tried to figure out who, regarding the arrangements, who's playing those string parts or who's singing background. I was interested and other things. So I wasn't, but I was primarily a serious, young kid who played concerts and did classical music, before I kind of ventured out with no specific road in my mind, other than I was going to have to try to figure out a way that I could continue sitting right where you see me now, behind a piano by myself. I was never in a group, never, and somehow could figure out a way to get through my life. And coming from a kind of, very kind of straight Jewish family from New Jersey and nobody involved in any kind of business of the arts or music, how I was going to figure out how I could do this without getting a regular job. That's it.
Think about this. All right. So here's the thing. I'm Brian Sebastian. It's movie reviews and more. WomenOnTV.tv, iTube 247 out of Franklin, Tennessee, iHeartRadio, and all the platforms around the world. The reason why this show is important to me is I call you, Randy, and I haven't said this in a long, long time. What's hot? What's cool? What's sexy? You fall into those categories because of what you have done. Think about this. When you were growing up in Teaneck, did you ever think you were going to do what you're doing now? I don't think so, right?
Oh, no. I had no. I wasn't, I certainly wasn't any kind of, and at that time, writing scores for films, you go to see Dr. Zhivago and you heard this score by Maurice Jarre, and it's a little different than the normal stuff. And, it's just the normal stuff. I wasn't, so I knew about it, but I wasn't focused on it at all. And basically that came many, many years after I was working as a musician in other areas before I got into that and had the chops, the musical chops, not just the classical chops, but doing 15, 20 years of other things that I was able to, when presented with an opportunity, which you have to be all the time, able to handle what it takes to write film music, But no, it wasn't a dream. The dream was to somehow compose music for whatever it was, the songwriting that started completely. I wasn't a songwriter, but at that time when I got out of school, if you could carry a tune and write a decent melody, you could get a record deal. That's maybe overstating it, but you know, the music business changed. No longer were guys taking songs. A music publisher took a song to a record producer at a record label, who took a song to an artist they were producing. You know, that changed with Bob Dylan, the Beatles, and everybody else. The 99% of the people selling records wrote their own and produced their own music. That completely changed everything about the music business, and that's the time, maybe a little later after that started, certainly, when I suddenly, you know, got out of school. And you know, anyway,
let me ask you this: did you ever see you writing a song for a rapper? I'm talking about Nelly. Did you ever see that one come to fruition?
No, but that's, you see, Brian, I wish you had, if you had time, but each one of these things like that is an amazing story, which I won't get into. I didn't write a song for a rapper. I wrote a song years before that, and I didn't like that song, and I thought it was too kind of soft, ballady, and so I never even recorded that song on my first two albums. And then by chance, because of something, I played it for the head of a record label, because I remember years before that, my publisher said, "Oh, you know, we took that song to Russ Regan. He was running a company called Uni. Uni became popular because they were the only people that would distribute records by a guy named Elton John. And so they picked up the Dick James. They were the only people that would take it. Everybody else turned it down. And so Russ became, and there were other people on that label, but that was Uni, and it was Universal. And so I recorded that song, and then you wouldn't even believe, I'm not going to get into it, but I took it up to San Francisco and played songs by some guy that was producing Patti LaBelle when she had a group called LaBelle.
Yep.
This song was the prettiest, quietest song. It was done on this album that I did. Played it for this guy. Long story short, months later, Patti LaBelle does the song. I had forgotten about it, but she does it was like a 3-minute, very commercial song. She does like a 9-minute scream out. It was unbelievable. She obviously picked up on something. It was fantastic. They edited it down for a single, and it was a big hit. R&B. It was just at the end of the time when there were still kind of R&B stations. Before all that just completely ended. And so it became an R&B hit. It was at the same time that my first records kind of happened in England, and Barry Manilow recorded Weekend in New England, another song I wrote. And so I was kind of hot as a writer. Okay, cut. 20 years later, Brian, some kid in his bedroom in Newark, New Jersey, not a great place, I'm from right near there, gets a budget Patti LaBelle, one of those things they put out years later, not kind of, you could see, they just threw stuff. It was Epic, I think. They were trying to, sell a few records. It was like a budget album of old Patti LaBelle stuff. The kid hears this thing. I didn't know anything about this till later, that I found out when I was getting the hip hop award of the year, and the kid hears this Patti LaBelle song and he likes the riff. So he does something, but it was still the Patti LaBelle song, and he sends it to somebody who his mother knew in St. Louis, who was a lawyer, blah, 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 Nelly. Gets it to Nelly. Nelly likes the thing and writes his own kind of takeoff called My Place. That's that story. You couldn't make that story up in a million years. Just know, and you know what? I was busy scoring films and doing stuff. I had been sort of out of the record business until that record was number 4 pop, number 2 R&B, and number 1 hip hop and dance. I didn't know a thing about it, and they called me up. They literally called me up and said, something about the publishing rights. Well, I didn't have the publishing rights. That was owned by like, a publisher I had years ago. And they had evidently made a deal to use it as a sample when it went down. It's not like anybody stole it from me, but they had the right to do that. You'd think they'd call me up and said, excuse me, by the way, Nelly just recorded your song, but they never did. So I found out when it was a monster hit. It was like, boom, that's how, but that's that little story about that song. I have lots of different things about my songs that for a time, after doing the albums and having the albums not happen, as far as for me as a commercial artist, it was like, oh, I've written all these songs. Well, yes, there were a lot of people that did the songs, but it was almost like once I got into scoring films, I completely forgot about all those years. Turns out some wonderful things, and kind of looking back at it and seeing what's happened and what still happens is kind of interesting. But that's that. When you mention Nelly, that's the story. I mean, you couldn't make it up. The whole thing is ridiculous. And I almost didn't do it in the first place. I only did it because I was trying to make a record deal with a guy named Russ Regan, who, after the Elton John stuff, 20th Century Fox gave him some money and they started a label. First thing out of the box was a guy named Barry White. So as soon as Russ started that label, boom, they were hot. And I had done a couple of albums, nothing happened. I took it to him to try to get, played some songs at a piano. And I remember this story about him hearing that song, and like the guy from the publishing company was an older guy, and he said, oh, Russ Regan likes that song from Neil Diamond. It's like, Neil Diamond? First of all, he writes his own stuff. Second of all, it made no sense. But I shelved, I remembered this idea. So since I was playing this guy's songs, and I thought, oh, maybe here's a simple song I could play at the piano, which it was. I started playing it, and as soon as he heard it, he said, did you write that song? Like acting like it was a hit. Well, never hit. No one ever recorded it. But so I knew, okay, whether you like it or not, do it on this album. Had I not done it on that album, Patti LaBelle wouldn't have heard it. Yep. And a million years later, this kid who I met at the like hip hop awards, who of course got, kind of shafted in the whole thing. That's what happens. There's like the Nelly side of the song had like 18 writers. My side had one. So I was cool. I had half of it and it could never be touched. But there were a million people, and this kid got kind of involved in people. And so I wish I would have done, I would have said, hey, you deserve this. But I never saw him after that night. And he was so excited just to be there and get his 1/18th of half of it.
Wow.
That's just a little tale about something that has nothing to do with films. I want to get into the films because, but anyway, there's lots of interesting kind of stuff in kind of hindsight. And especially now, because I know you may not be interested. We're talking in the first place because of something, a little ditty that I wrote and recorded all here in my backyard, played all the instruments, sort of loosely about the COVID, called Coming Out the Other Side. And that's kind of, what's come out now. It's completely, couldn't be more diametrically opposed to what I've been doing for the last 25 or 30 years, which I like to think of serious kind of, film scoring stuff and then other stuff. But in talking to people now, they may be interested in, we'll talk about that for a minute, 2 minutes, or not. But all of a sudden, they're looking at this thing of mine, this history, and they're going, hold on a second. You did this, you did blah, blah, blah. So for me, to be honest with you, Brian, it's great. I'm having a blast because I'm kind of getting to like, it's just fun. And I don't have to make it. It's all there. It's all like on the record,
Well, I've always said this. I've always said the songwriters are some of the most happiest people I've ever met on the planet. You would never know who they are, but they're always smiling. Why are they smiling? Because people are singing their songs. all the way, as they would say, to the bank. You happen to be one of those. But this is what separates you from everybody else, from a John Williams, from a Rachel, from even a Danny Elfman. You still have all these other things.
Yeah, they're right. And I love all, I know them, and I love all those people. They come at it like Danny, or they come from a different place because they didn't have. Now, are they brilliant? Absolutely. But they come to that music they're writing for that movie from a different, we don't have to talk about Hans. They don't come from, they don't read and write. Does that mean they're any less brilliant? Absolutely not. They're just coming from it from a different place. But unfortunately, I'm saddled with all that stuff. And I have this history in the musical thing. And then that whole album song thing. And that's why people, for years, I somehow get asked, it's funny, am I the son of that songwriting artist guy? Like when I went to Australia for the Olympics to write the theme. No. And then, you know what? And it's like, hold up. I was 25, 26 when you're asking me about. So what's the big deal? They just can't fathom it, that I'm the same person that suddenly, and it wasn't sudden, but when I started doing, quote, the big Hollywood movies, that I'm that same person. And I go, what's the big deal? It's easy to see. But people don't look at it like that. It's sort of weird. And the last thing I'll say, and I'm going to let you talk, but if any of those songs, especially once I was with Clive Davis and he was trying to get me to, the 3-minute commercial hook. If any of those records of mine had been hits, I could have never gone into film scoring because nobody out here would have given me the fucking time of day as a, quote, serious musician. And luckily, nobody, it's like when I, quote, came to town, I had been into town, I had been doing lots of stuff. I was like a new guy. I probably looked several years younger than I really was. And so the only people that knew anything that I ever wrote a song were directors like Jonathan Lynn and Alan Parker, who was in my mind the best director, hands down. When I worked with them, they knew a couple of these songs that had been successful. I mean, my records in England, only because they were in London at the time. Nobody else, because it wasn't my job to write a song. It's my job to help the director, with his vision of a particular scene and let the music support. That's my thing, not writing. Last thing they want to hear from me, a person scoring their film, is I got a great idea for a song based on my theme. They don't want to know that. So anyway, that's my.
Well, let me ask you this: when you write the theme for NBC, what was this like? Because they didn't do this. This is coming out of left field, right?
Okay. You asked about something, and then I was saying to myself, because sometimes, like you've asked me a couple of things, and I kind of went in a little. I didn't really answer your question, and what I was going to say, because I wasn't sure which one you were referring to. What happened with NBC? The guy there was a guy named Dick Ebersol. I'm sure you heard his name. Big guy, head of NBC Sports for years. And what happened was, after I started scoring films, and after I did those big comedies, which I was the comedy king. I'm not particularly funny. What I write isn't particularly funny. Suddenly, you always have to have a little luck twist. Mine was a guy by the name of Ivan Reitman who had done it.
We love Ivan.
So long story, won't get into it. So I did Twins and Kindergarten Cop and Ghostbusters 2, which, by the way, is coming out 2 weeks. My score for why 32 years later? But Sony Classical, major thing.
I'll tell you why. Because there's a whole new audience that's never seen certain things, and they go back and listen to things.
But they released after that picture, because it had been 5 or 6 years since the first one, because everybody wanted, I guess I wasn't around, too much money. And by the time they made it, you can imagine the artists, the R&B artists, everybody in the world wanted to write the new Ghostbusters song, whatever that was going to be. Well, and the first Ghostbusters song obviously was just plopped into the picture, which had a fantastic score by Elmer Bernstein. Nobody gave that enough credit. That was the music of the picture, but you had this song. So then 5 or 6 years later, there were like, because people didn't submit songs for movies by that time. They made records, and you know what I mean? Complete records. So let's say there were 50 songs. Well, they cut them down to 8 songs. And guess what? They weren't in the movie at all. It was all 99% Randy Edelman score. But at the end of the movie, they went to 8 songs. And what did they release as the soundtrack of the picture? Songs. No score.
Well, I think about this because Ray Parker Jr., who I listen to every day, he's more R&B. But where did he get famous from? Is this? And obviously, he's got a documentary coming out through Sony, which I can't wait to see, which ties back into what you were doing on that. So it makes sense to me. But talk about this. What was it like for you being locked down and then writing that?
Oh, you mean locked down now?
Yeah,
this year. And writing my Coming Out the Other Side.
Mm-hmm.
Woke up in the middle of the night, had this little ditty, a chorus idea about grab your hat, put your best suit on, we're coming out the other side. And what does that mean? But it was like this commercial thing. Normally that happens to me, especially when I'm doing a film. There may be a problem with a scene and then I can't solve it. And when you're scoring a film, that can't happen. You have to solve everything pretty immediately when you're writing the cue. But I'll come up with something and run out here. But in this case, I had this idea. I sang it into my phone in bed inside, very few steps from here. And then I kept messing around with it. And I haven't written songs or made records or anything like that. And I guess and then I came up with a kind of odd thing. I kept thinking about 1957, Buddy Holly, Peggy Sue. Now you may say, what? And I got this thing and that excited me. And I just did it all here and had somebody come over. I think I did 2 people over the phone. The rest is all me. But that's how that happened. And the lyric is, it's tied into that, but it doesn't have to be exactly about that. It never says about, COVID or, the virus or anything like that.
But how was that? Anyway, but how was that for your head though? Was it okay?
Oh, it was great. Fine. I was having fun.
Me too.
Completely having fun. And if you listen to it, it's just fun. It's not some message thing. It's fun. And it sounds like I'm having fun. And when you listen to the record and I start going, here we go, and I'm screaming, I never did that before. I just did it. And I sort of seemed, I was just going to take it out. But then I listened to it. I don't think I played it for anybody. And I said, who cares? Who cares? Because no one's ever going to hear this. Well, thank God I was wrong, because I started playing it for a couple of people and everybody reacted to it. And like I said, I've been getting away from that for a million years. But now, whereas several years ago, I wouldn't have even exposed that. Now, I don't care.
Exactly.
Remember what you just said about people hear their songs, and I don't have to hear my songs. All I have to do is turn the television on in every planet on the globe. I don't care if it's Korea or Brazil or Antarctica or Germany and there's a load of my movies on, because I happen to do, for somebody who's a composer, the right movies. I didn't know at the time, but I did the kind of movies that they just program and play. I mean, a lot of them were comedies. And when I said those comedies with Ivan, those were kind of concept, big scores. But then I would get a call to do a little picture called My Cousin Vinny. or
I love that film.
or a picture called The Mask with a really brilliantly talented guy named Jim Carrey, or While You Were Sleeping, a little sweet picture with. But anyway, I kept hitting these. They weren't just big comedy scores. And then Adam Sandler calls me up, and no, at that time I said, no way, I gotta start steering the ship. That's hard to do. And meanwhile, I was having a blast. I appreciated because what was happening to me, but I had to work to do Gettysburg and Last of the Mohegans and Come See the Paradise, which is Alan Parker's masterpiece about the Japanese internment camps here in California that no one ever really saw. But my music from that, it's been used for so much stuff that is kind of funny, and people think it's, oh, that's the music from The Rock, or that's the music from, no, it's the music from that film. But anyway, so I had to kind of make a serious effort to not, you couldn't just do those films. You have to get those films, and you have to get somebody and say, I just did A, B, C, D, and E, and some guy's just done this really serious picture about something. Now try to get him to hire you when there's 50 people in the wings, great people who have done 50 serious films. So anyway, that took me a while. But the thing about Adam that I'll tell you about is by the time that was his first picture, I think it was so ridiculous. I said, listen, man, I'm trying to, but he was a good guy and a talented guy. And so I did it. It was called Billy Madison. And it's like all these things are like, they're classics now.
Yep.
And if you go with, once in a while, I don't do it very often. I'll go and do like a master class at Berkeley, or, one of these. I don't do it in the dorms, especially the kids who are like freshmen. There's 3 films in every dorm room: Boy, Girl, The Mask, My Cousin Vinny, and Billy Madison. I score, and that's all they want to know about. And I'm trying to talk about, let's talk about Gettysburg or Mohegans or Diabolique, or they want to know about those nerd films, which is fine,
Because they haven't gotten there yet. So when I think about Gettysburg, I'm thinking about Jeff Daniels or Martin Sheen. I'm picturing the scene. That's why it's iconic. When I think of The Last Mohegans, you wrote that yesterday in my mind because it's timeless. That's why that is special to a lot of us critics when it comes to stuff like that. And what I miss seeing is talking to a lot of you composers, because I knew what was coming down, what was coming with COVID-19. I knew this was going to happen. And I was like, thank goodness I got a chance to talk to a lot of people in person, because we may not get that chance to talk to a lot of them in person ever again, based on where they live, how old they are, and what's going on in their lives. So it's an honor to reconnect with you and what you've done.
No, that's great. It's great. And by the way, you may know this, but I'm going to tell you of something you just said. You want to talk with anybody who's a film composer?
Absolutely.
You let them know, Brian, what you said when you just came on the camera at the beginning, and you said that you were, you appreciated what I did. You let one of these people know that, they'll talk to you all day, because they'll welcome it. Believe me. If you get them at a bad time, okay. But so if if you're interested, believe me, it doesn't have anything to do with the COVID. I understand that maybe everybody's sitting around maybe doing nothing, but they'll absolutely love talking to you, because you have a passion for it, and for a passion for whatever it is that they've composed that you've related to, So I'm just telling you that as a point of information, just for you to know. People appreciate that. There's nothing like that. That's why I always say, we're like suckers. Like you mentioned Jeff Daniels. I wrote him a 3-page letter recently when I saw him on Broadway before the shit hit the fan in To Kill a Mockingbird. Mm. He was the reason that I did Gettysburg. He said, wow. I didn't even know who he was, even though he had been in stuff. There's a scene in there. When I first saw it, it was like, oh my God, it's a 50,000 hour mini series about all this work. And it's a new thing that Ted Turner started called TNT. It's like, this is going to take me 40 years. They have no money. Money was never a part of my thing at all. I don't care if something is good, but this thing was going to be. And then it turns out, so I saw this scene, that one where the guy tries to desert or something. It was so wonderful. That's the first time I noticed Jeff Daniels. He had done, I guess, a lot of stuff. But, and then I went and I was intrigued, as I always was, with this guy who spent 20 years living on his cot, trying to convince everybody in the world that he was going to start a 24-hour news service, and they all thought he was nuts. His name was Ted Turner. Yeah. And I made sure I went and I met him, and there was no way after meeting this guy and his enthusiasm about the Civil War and everything, I'm going to walk out of there and say, you know what? I don't know what TNT is, and it's too much work. No, I walked out of there and I knew it was going to, and then that led to a really nice relationship. Yeah, big time relationship. And now I'll go to like the Boston Pops and do it, and then what happens is, so I put together a suite that you don't often do, and one of the movements of the suite is very obvious. It's the music, some of the music that not in the film, because I don't even think the Gettysburg Address is actually in the film. I forgot, I don't think it is, but it wasn't music I wrote. It was just music for the film. And somebody, whoever it is, who's around the area, who's well known, will read the Gettysburg Address, which takes 90 seconds. It's short. And so a lot of nice stuff has turned out from that. And he ended up buying a little company called New Line Cinema to release Gettysburg as a feature, because nobody would. And he bought it.
It's an excellent film. And we were pleasantly surprised when we first screened that. And New Line, I always champion New Line because they were the baby to Warner Brothers. Left them alone, they did magic. The Freddy Krueger series, the Final Destination, the Austin Powers series, and then the things that came out of that was just magnificent.
Yeah, it was a really interesting situation. So, I kind of look back at that and sort of like how that thing, Gettysburg, the whole story about it, and me not wanting to do it, and then saying, I kind of like it. Just happened to be that Ted Turner was in town because he was married at the time to Jane Fonda. It was like Oscar time, and she was presenting an award, and it turns out I said, well, I don't know about it, and they said, well, he's out at the beach in a hotel. What the hell is Ted Turner doing? I went right out there, strutted in, and he was so full of enthusiasm. And the director was there, and one of the other producers, but I never even, it was just he and I he was just talking about it. And the first thing that I did when I finished it is I flew down to Atlanta, and we screened the picture, or at least the first part, at least the main title, with that music. And this guy and Jane Fonda, they just jumped out of their seats, and he said, that's it. This is not going down the way it is. And he tried to buy Miramax from the Weinsteins, and of course they didn't do it. And then he bought New Line. That's the only reason that he got involved. And of course, ran into a very bad thing a couple of years ago with that AOL deal or something.
I know.
But Jesus. But that's what happened. It's just, he does exactly what he says and what he wanted to do. And so another one, thank God I did it. I could have easily not done it. And now how could you not do Gettysburg? Well, there were reasons at the time, but luckily in a few instances, the Last of the Mohican thing with Michael Mann. Now there's someone that people would say, oh he's the roughest guy. Guess what? That was the easiest job I ever had. Now I came in late. It was another composer, so it's an odd story, but it was just, there was no time. And it was pretty straight ahead what was involved. And he would come up on his motorcycle every day. It's Michael Mann, and I had a blast. It was not when we got done with that, everybody was like, because people said, this thing is not going to be happening. It's too long. It's historical. No one's in it. And you'll say, hold it. There was a guy named Daniel Day-Lewis in it.
That's right.
Yeah, but even though he had won an Oscar for My Left Foot or something, he had never been in any picture that was at all commercial. So believe me, that thing came out with no enthusiasm. And so I said, I was done with it. I said, we should do a soundtrack album. They looked at, why? This thing is I said, I'm telling you, couldn't get them to do it. So I went into a place in Hollywood with my friend, and I took Trevor Jones' stuff, because he had, and my stuff. And in I'd say it took 4 hours. I put it all together. Trevor was upset, not at me, because I never met Trevor Jones, by the way. People think we collaborated. We didn't collaborate. I never met him. It had nothing to do with his music. So all my music, and his music was all his music. So realizing that, which sounds odd, I put it together, and they said, oh, okay. So finally I said, I got them to do it, even though it sounds like, why wouldn't anybody do it? What's the big deal? Because there's a reuse fee. You know, the musicians, this is a little thing after millions and millions of soundtracks sold, because there are no songs or anything. And they said, well, you better put it in order of the film so it makes sense. I said, no. You better put my stuff, that's Randy, that's Trevor. That way it's obvious. Never in a million years thinking this is going to be the biggest soundtrack, just score of the I didn't have any concept of that, and I did. It's the truth. So I did it. And as soon as that movie came out, people were kind of like gravitating. And so this little company called Morgan Creek, it was on their label, because I couldn't, and that was it. So you never can tell. But it sounds now, oh, it's just a thing. No, it could have, something else could have happened. And there could have been no soundtrack.
Here's the thing. I'm going to run out of time. I got about 40 seconds. I got to have a part 2 with you, but I got to get you in our studio in Hollywood. It's a nice private studio.
Hello.
Because I got to introduce you to the girls, because they'll have a blast talking to you. I got 11 co-hosts. They're all women.
I got to have them come in. Now, for the next couple of weeks, I'm here, and then I'm not. All you got to do is call me. That's 3 seconds. I'll come over. Just call me. Let me know.
We'll make this happen. Yeah. All right. So Randy Edelman, the one and only. That's Brian Sebastian.
Sorry about our beginning, but you got it.
Don't worry about it.